Luciana's story begins in a small town where religion dominated everyone's life. Since child she always felt that there was something beyond what she was taught in the church. While her friends played with dolls, she became obsessed with forbidden books of ancient magic. At the age of 12 she found an old diary of a woman accused of witchcraft in the 15th century. Fascinated, she read it every night, hidden, wishing to live the same power. Her family noticed her change. She became lonely, mysterious and disinterested in faith. God is for the weak, she murmured, without knowing the price she would pay for her arrogance. On a stormy night she heard a voice whispering her name in the wind. "Luciana, the power you seek is closer than you think," said the voice. With her heart beating with excitement and fear, she decided to follow the darkness. At 16 years old, Luciana already mastered minor rituals, but she wanted more. She heard rumors of an ancient ritual that guaranteed unlimited power in exchange for a carnal tribute. It is just a myth, she thought, but curiosity consumed her. One night she walked alone to a forest where, according to the legends, witches made pacts with dark entities. She lit black candles and drew symbols on the ground with blood from her own finger. "If there is someone listening, I offer you my body and my soul in exchange for power," she whispered. Suddenly the wind stopped and the environment was filled with a heavy and disturbing energy. Then a tall, dark figure emerged from the shadows, with red eyes like burning embers. "You have called and here I am," he said, with a deep and seductive voice. Luciana felt fear but also an inexplicable attraction to that entity. "Do you know what you are asking for?" Luciana asked the demon, smiling with malice. "Yes, I want power. I want everyone to kneel before me," Lucia answered with firmness. "Power has a price and you already know what it is," he said, approaching slowly. Lucia murmured, "I am not afraid." She said, "I want pleasure and power." The demon said, "Give me your body and I will give you what you want," he whispered in her ear. Luciana felt a shiver run through her skin when the creature caressed her with cold hands, and he said, "I will make you feel pleasure like no human has ever experienced," he promised. The demon asked for her soul, and said, "When you die you will be mine, but until then the world will belong to you." Luciana accepted without imagining what would come next. Since the night of the pact her life changed radically. Men and women fell surrendered to her presence without her doing anything. Her business prospered, her beauty was intensified and her confidence was unbreakable. She became the owner of a circle of witchcraft where others worshipped her. The rituals became more and more intense, filled with lust and debauchery. "And pleasure is my kingdom and I am its queen," she said proudly. But despite all the power and pleasure she felt a growing emptiness. Every night the devil visited her in dreams, demanding more of her, saying, "You have no idea what you have begun," he whispered. But she ignored the warnings, not knowing that hell had already put its mark on her. Little by little glory turned into horror. She began to have nightmares of shadows devouring her body in the dark. Her reflection in the mirrors was distorted, showing a gaunt and terrifying face. "This is not real," she tried to convince herself, but fear grew. In the rituals something changed. The entities she invoked no longer obeyed her orders. Voices sinister whispered disturbing things to her about her destiny. "You belong to us, Luciana, yours is ours. The deal is done," they whispered in her ear. She tried to get away, but every time she did the demon came back stronger. "You can't escape because you are already mine," he told her in her nightmares. Her once glorious life became a spiral of terror. Desperate, Luciana tried to make a ritual to break the pact. She locked herself in her mansion and lit all the white candles she found. She said sacred words, hoping that some force would free her, but instead a dark presence filled the room. "Do you really think you can run away from me?" said the demon, appearing in front of her. His voice was no longer seductive but cold and full of rage. "Leave me alone," Luciana screamed, but he only smiled. "Tonight you will fulfill your part of the deal," he whispered maliciously. The time to pay with her soul came quicker. She felt her strength disappear and her body fall to the ground. Hell was waiting for her. When Luciana closed her eyes she felt as if her body was being sucked into a whirlpool of darkness. Heartbreaking screams surrounded her as she fell into a void, without her skin burning, but it wasn't fire. It was as if her soul was being torn apart. "Where am I?" she asked in terror, but in the back of her mind she already knew the answer. When she opened her eyes she was in an immense cavern, illuminated by a reddish glow. Rusty chains hung from the ceiling and the air smelled of sulfur and burnt flesh. Deformed figures writhed on the ground screaming in agony. Welcome. Luciana saw the demon with whom she had made the pact smiling with satisfaction. It's time for you to pay your debt, Luciana, he said, pointing at the shadows surrounding her. No, this is not real, screamed Luciana, trying to back away. You always knew this day would come, the demon said, approaching slowly. But I had power, I had wealth. You promised me the world, she stammered. Yes, you had it for a time, he said with a cruel smile. Now the deal is fulfilled. But Luciana, feeling terror ran through her body, said, Did why you do this to me? The demon said, You accepted, Luciana, don't forget it. I only gave you what you asked. And now what? You will torture me forever, she asked with desperation. No, the punishment is worse than the pain of remembering every mistake, every victim, every pleasure that now becomes torment, whispered the demon. And God, where is God? She asked with a thread of voice. While he loved you, you rejected him. Suddenly an invisible force pushed her against a burning stone wall. The demon snapped his fingers and grotesque figures emerged from the shadows, were humans or what was left of disfigured beings with faces twisted with desire and pain. These are the souls of those you used, of those you corrupted. Now they will use you, said the demon. Luciana screamed in horror at seeing those shadows approaching with bony hands and eyes empty. The pleasure that you so adored will now be your eternal torment, laughed the demon. She felt their sticky and cold bodies on her and her mind was filled with horrible visions. The desire that she once enjoyed now became a prison unbearable. No more, it is enough, she screamed, but her voice was drowned in the darkness. For the first time in her life Luciana felt the true fear and the true regret. In the middle of her torment a thought crossed her mind. God, and if there is still a chance, she thought with desperation. Her pride resisted but her soul screamed for salvation. God, if you can hear me, save me, she whispered between tears. Immediately the demon became enraged, his face deformed in a grimace of hatred. He said, Shut up, you belong to me. He roared, but Luciana no longer heard his voice. She felt a warm light envelop her body as if someone hugged her in the middle of the darkness. God, please have mercy on me, she screamed with all her strength. The cavern shook and the shadows pulled away with a terrifying shriek, and then for the first time in her life she felt something she had never experienced before. Esperanza. Luciana looked at her trembling hands, still feeling the burning of hell on her skin. The doctor explained to her that she was in a coma for 3 days between life and death. It is a miracle that you are alive, the nurse told her with a smile, but in her mind Luciana could only hear the voice of the devil. You will never be free. God saved me, she murmured, but doubt clung to her heart. Her body was weak. Her soul had really been forgiven. I am not worthy, she thought, remembering every sin, every act of lust and evil she committed. She looked around and felt a deep fear. Hell would come for her again. At that moment a nun entered the room with a Bible in her hand. God has brought you back for a reason, Luciana, but the fight has just begun. When she leaves the hospital, Luciana tried to leave her past behind, but something would not leave her in peace. Nightmares tormented her every night. She saw the face of the devil in every shadow. She heard whispers in her ear tempting her flesh with the pleasures she used to enjoy. Do you think God can cleanse you of what you did? He mocked. The desperate voice began to search for answers in the Bible that was given to her in the hospital. Each word spoke of mercy and the love of God. Even though her sins are like the scarlet, like snow, they will be whitened. Isaiah 1 verse 18. God, can you really love me after all I did? She asked through tears. In that instant she felt the same warm presence that had saved her from hell. For the first time she believed forgiveness was real. One night while praying, her room was filled with a supernatural chill. You can't escape me, whispered the voice of the devil in the darkness. She turned and saw him standing in the corner, his silhouette trapped in shadows. You were mine on earth and you still are, he said with a crooked smile. Jesus is my Lord and I don't belong to you anymore, she shouted with courage. The devil growled and his eyes burned with fury. Then I will destroy everything you love, he threatened before disappearing. Luciana felt fear but also a new conviction. God was with her. I'm not going back, she murmured, squeezing the Bible to her chest. She had won the first test, but the battle had not yet ended. With time Luciana understood that she could not hide her testimony. She decided to speak in a local church about what she experienced in hell. People looked at her with skepticism, some with fear, others with curiosity. "I was a witch given over to darkness and lust," she confessed with a firm voice. "I made a pact with the devil and I thought there would never be a way out, but God has mercy on me," she continued with tears in her eyes. There was a deep silence in the room, and then someone began to cry, "I have also fallen into immorality. God can forgive me," a woman asked. "Yes," Luciana answered with a smile. "If he could save me, he can also save you." Her testimony began to change lives. God was using her to save others. Luciana understood that her battle was not only against the devil but against her own flesh. Temptation continued lurking, from people who helped her grow in her new life with God. "God did not save me alone to free me, he saved me to help others." She thought to go down with women who had been victims of prostitution and the occult. His story, once filled with darkness, now shone with the light of God's grace. "I am no longer a slave to lust or sin, I am a daughter of God," she declared with joy for the first time in his life, and felt true peace. Luciana had found what she had always sought. And this time it was eternal. Luciana thought her torment was over, but one night she woke up with a shiver. Her room was cold and a shadow moved in the corner. "You thought you had gotten rid of me," the devil whispered. His voice was different, filled with more rage and desperation. "Jesus rescued me, you can't hurt me," she answered bravely. "Maybe not, but I can hurt those you love," he said, with a sinister smile. Luciana felt afraid, but she remembered the words of the Bible, "Resist the devil and he will flee from you." James 4 verse 7, "In the name of Jesus I command you to go away." The shadow shouted with authority, screeched and disappeared in a burst of black smoke. Lucia's spiritual battle had barely begun. Although she was determined to follow God, her flesh continued fighting against her past. The thoughts of forbidden pleasure tried to invade her mind. At times she felt the same dark seduction that had led her to the pact with the devil. "Just one more time, what harm can it do?" she thoughts whispered, but she knew it was a trap. She did not want to be a slave to sin again. "God help me, give me strength to resist," she prayed fervently. Each time she resisted, her spirit grew stronger. "You are free, Luciana, do not return to slavery," said her pastor in a conversation. "But the past continues to call me," she answered with tears in her eyes, "because you have not closed the door completely, and it is time to do so." Luciana made a radical decision to destroy everything that tied her to his previous life. She burned witchcraft books and clothes used in rituals, even jewelry she used in the occult. "If God gave me a new life, I must leave the old one behind," she said with determination. Her house began to feel lighter, as if a burden had been gone. But the enemy did not give up so easily. "You burned objects, but your mind is still chained," whispered the voice in his head. She knew that his true battle was not against physical things but spiritual things. He had to renew his mind with the word of God. "I will not conform with this world, I will be transformed," he declared with faith. Romans 12 verse 2. For the first time she felt that he was truly free. Just when she thought he was at peace, an old lover appeared in his life. "Luciana, where have you been? I have missed you," he said with a charming smile. Her heart beat fast. Poor the man had been one of his greatest weaknesses. "I am not the same as before," she answered, trying to stay firm. "Let's go, just a coffee, just a conversation," she insisted, getting too close. Her skin shuddered. The temptation was real. "God, give me strength," she prayed in her mind. She looked at the man and felt sorry. She had been like him before. "I don't need what used to fill me. Now I have something better." The peace of God answered. She walked away without looking back and knew she had won another battle. After so many struggles, Luciana began to wonder what her purpose was. "God didn't save you just to free you from hell, he saved you to use your story," her pastor said. "How can I help someone after everything I did?" she asked, confused. "Why are there so many people trapped in the darkness like you?" That made her reflect. There were so many women slaves to the pleasure of lust, of witchcraft. "If God rescued me, then he can rescue them too," she thought hopefully. She decided to share her testimony in more churches, in more places. "I was a witch, I was a slave to sin, but Jesus set me free," she said with courage. And every time she spoke, she saw how other people's hearts began to change. She had found her purpose. Now she was a warrior of God. The more people heard her testimony, the more spiritual attacks began to occur, more intense voices in the darkness and shadows moving in the room. "You took away many souls from us, Luciana, now you will pay for it," the demons whispered. She woke up sweating with her heart racing, but this time she was not afraid. The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? Psalm 27 verse 1. She recited in prayer. She knew the devil was furious because her testimony was freeing people, but instead of giving in to fear she intensified her prayer and fasting. God, give me strength, protect all who are listening to this message, she cried out. She knew she was in a spiritual war, but she was no longer fighting alone. The power of God surrounded her like a shield. One night while praying she felt an evil presence in the room. She opened her eyes and saw the same demon with whom she had made the pact, but this time his face did not reflect power but anger and desperation. This is a last chance, Luciana, come back to me or you will pay the consequences. He threatened her. Jesus already rescued me, you have no power over me, she responded with courage. If you cannot be mine, then I will destroy everything you love. The demon roared with hatred. Luciana felt a strong tremor in her house, the lights flickering, but she stood firm. The one who is in me is greater than the one who is in the world. In John 4 verse 4, the demon screamed with rage and disappeared into the darkness. Luciana had won, but the battle was not yet over. Luciana understood that not only did she need to protect herself but to free many others who were listening to her were still trapped in sin and darkness. God not only rescued me to testify, He rescued me to free me. She understood. She organized a special event at the church where many people went to look for Judah while she prayed for them. Some began to scream and fall on their knees. Lord, free them. How did you free me? She cried out with a heart full of faith. The power of God descended and many people were restored. Jesus, thank you, because this is not about me but about you, she said with tears in her eyes. She had been used as an instrument of God and her purpose was being fulfilled. The same witch who had served Satan now served God with all her being. One day, while she was walking through the city, she saw a young woman with the same look that she had in the past. She approached her and asked her, "Are you looking for something more in life?" The young woman looked at her in surprise. "Yes, but I don't know what it is," she answered. "I also looked in the wrong places but I found the truth," she told her with tenderness her story, how pleasure and power never filled her emptiness. The young woman began to cry, "I have been involved in witchcraft and I do not know how to get out. God can free you. If He saved me, He can save you too," she assured her. Together they prayed and the young woman gave her life to Christ. At that moment Luciana had closed a cycle. Now her mission was to save others from hell. Satan had lost one of her best servants and God had gained a warrior. Years later Luciana became a preacher known for her testimony. What was once shame was now her greatest testimony of God's grace. "God literally took me out of hell," she said. "In every sermon I was no longer afraid. I no longer felt the temptation to return to the past. I had learned that true freedom is only found in charism. The devil promised pleasure, followed by death, but Jesus promised life and gave it to me in abundance. I knew that I would still face struggles, but now I had the armor of God." One day she looked to heaven and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, because you never abandoned me." She had found her purpose, her peace and her salvation. Luciana, the former witch, was now a daughter of God.